Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, feels good to be back on this side of the table. Whew.
Oh yeah, coming off of the last episode where I interviewed you, that was different. I told people about that, and I kept reiterating how grateful I am to have a podcast partner, so I don't have to do all the questions, all the thinking. When I was interviewing you one-on-one, I can't lose tension at all, because I knew I had to make sure I had an intelligent question the next time. And then I also just had to listen to make sure I don't ask a question that you just said to me. So it was very different interviewing you. So what was it like for you?
It sucks being on the guest side, man. I felt like that went really, I know it didn't. It came out fine, but it felt really oh, I wanted to say, these things that I never got to say, and was it okay? 'Cause that's what our guests always ask when we hang up, and I felt the same way. And now I empathize a lot more.
No, you did a good job.
It's tough.
I at least know, it was easy to interview because I know when you're going to stop talking. I don't know, just some of those little intricacies, just working with you so much. It was easier to interview than it would be somebody that I didn't know. So.
Well, yeah, but you blindsided me with all those front-end questions, too. I came in ready hot to talk about Portage Park for an hour and talking about what I did when I was 7.
Yeah, but everybody loved hearing about elementary Tom.
Yeah, it's a really cool kid. All right, so let's jump in here, and we will get to the episode where we get you as well. So that is coming for those curious.
All right, so I set myself.
I was the beta test here.
All right.
But what do we got? What do we got for the housing provider tip of the week?
Housing provider tip of the week. I've made this mistake before. I heard somebody else make this mistake. Someone reports low water pressure, or maybe you're going to do a turnover and the sink's got low water pressure. You start moving maybe the plumbing around. You start looking at the supply line, and 9 out of 10 times, you just have a bad aerator on the actual faucet. So make sure when you're troubleshooting low water pressure, it doesn't mean all your pipes have to be replaced. A lot of people are like, oh my God, maybe coincidentally they have lead pipes and they think this is it. Now we're gonna have to go through it. A lot of times it's just that aerator on the faucet. So be careful when you're diagnosing what your issue is, and to start with the easiest, cheapest, quickest ways to solve something, and then kind of work to the pipe replacement later. So that's it.
That's a good one. All right. Our guest today, I'm excited to have him on. He came into my life about a year ago. We were brokers representing. He was representing the seller. I was representing the buyer on a awesome four unit. And shout out to Zach Posey who purchased that. Since then, we've stayed in touch, tried to get a couple things going. But a great story here for our listeners. He started in real estate 6 years ago. Before that, he was a personal trainer. Took the leap to become a leasing agent. Started grinding out at Peak Realty. Eventually worked his way up to a commercial broker. He's now a very successful commercial broker, also an investor himself. Without further ado, excited to welcome on the show today, Alex Morsch. Alex, how are we doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited, man. We've talked about this for a while, so glad to finally get you on the show here. So first and foremost, let's talk about being a personal trainer, because that sounds like a nice job, right? Did you have to grind out there, or were you just sitting there and people coming up to you saying, hey, make me stronger, make me faster?
No, definitely a grind, especially, kind of the same trajectory as a realtor. It's tough to get off the ground, right? Just to get your first couple of clients. So there's definitely a lot of parallels. For me, it was more so just the waking up at the, 5 a.m. 5 a.m. wake up, and then you'd have clients at 5 p.m. So you'd be, at the gym essentially all day. A good job, but I think in the back of my mind, I always knew I wanted to kind of work for myself and, have a career path that, every day is just a different day, a different adventure.
Adventure is the right word, man. Jeez.
Yeah.
So I almost like having these podcasts in the middle of the day to record. It's all right, let me just get away from everything, throw my phone out, and talk to someone, and then we'll go back to the dumpster fire waiting for me. So
exactly.
let's say the leasing gig didn't come around, which we'll get to in a second. Could you see yourself doing anything else, right? Could you see if the real estate thing never happened, what's a potential outcome for Alex?
Ooh. I honestly, I think I would be an agent for musicians. I do a lot of music stuff as well, and I feel like I would be involved as a, band manager, working for a record label, something along those lines.
Tell us about your music venture. What do you do, or like what's your past for that?
So I produce music, like house music, techno, electronic stuff.
EDM, baby.
Yeah. And then, I've done a lot of events, here in Chicago over the past 5-6 years. So that's definitely, when I'm not doing real estate stuff, that's definitely another outlet, and, another place where I meet a lot of clients, just through, music, and, finding people who are, like-minded in a different capacity.
Well, I've known people on both sides things, whether they're some sort of entertainment party thrower, event planner, DJ, and also the personal trainer side, where both of those are places where you're obviously a little more intimate and talking with people, like for clientele for whatever their parallel business might be, such as real estate. So both of those are pretty good.
Yeah, no, I mean, the personal training thing, it's like you're talking to people about, their life, their goals and their life as a in the physical sense, but as a realtor, you're also trying to understand people's goals and trying to really assess them, and then be able to create a plan in which you can help them follow. So I see a lot of similarities between the two.
All right, so we get this leasing gig. We say, you know what, let's take a gamble on this. Talk to us about like that first, call it 90 days, 6 months, right? You just run around the weekends, getting a few $1,000 checks everywhere. Is that, just that grind for those of us who haven't gone through that process? Because that is a grind.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started, it was like, I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest. So just to give you guys a little background, Peak Realty stems from Peak Properties, which is a big property management company. So we, the concept was, we had so many properties that we manage, why would we have other people lease them? We should lease them all in-house, right? So we would literally we'd print out a piece of paper, many pieces of paper. We'd look through it, 60, 90 days out from lease expirations. We'd divvy up the units. The first step would be getting the keys, making sure you had keys that worked, right? And then you were just kind of off and running. It was definitely a lot looser of an operation, than it is today. But it was how I got to know the city. I graduated from DePaul, but I never, I hadn't been to all the different neighborhoods. So it's definitely how I kind of, learned where I was going, learned what I liked about certain neighborhoods. And, definitely was a great start in real estate, where a lot of people, when they start, they are, working under a team, doing open houses, and they don't really get a lot of reps. They're watching other people do it, but they're not doing deals. They're not meeting new people. It's hard to get momentum.
Leasing is such a great way to get into the business, just because you could get the entire cycle of a deal. A leasing deal might only take a couple of weeks from the time you go to get it on the market to the time you actually get a signed lease. When a sale, obviously we all know it could take months. So it's a great way to kind of, like you said, get the reps in there. What did you go to DePaul for? What was your study?
I studied sociology. So, I feel like that definitely correlates as well. Just, understanding people's tendencies and just being able to, yeah. So I feel like it was kind of the natural progression for me. But definitely leasing can be overwhelming at the scale in which we do it here. I mean, we have some people who are signing between 300 and 400 leases a year. So
that's what we do.
It's hustling.
Yeah, it's a crazy hustle. And eventually after 2-3 years of that, I was like, oh, okay, well, what's next?
But man,
Yeah, it
your
is
degrees. I was gonna say, man, your degree, what a advantage of understanding the human mind and how people think, and I don't know, I already feel like you're judging me right now, trying to think what I'm thinking. But Like that's like I got someone in her office that's like that, and she doesn't realize that's all the time. That's her kind of a superpower for understanding everything she knows about like people's headspace.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on too. Then the going back to the leasing, it's one of the things I've noticed about leasing on my own apartments. You realize what people don't like. Right? You're sitting there, you're seeing them say like they don't like this layout, they don't like this color, they don't like. Oh, I thought this would be Western exposure. You get all those data points. So every time you go to design, especially when you gut units, which Alex, you're the same as me. You usually just take everything down and do your own layout. Like you have all these data points here of what the end buyer, what the tenant's going to like. Some of it's very obvious, but some of the things you might not realize. And you see the same thing over and over again that you thought was awesome and everyone else hates. So I think there's so much value there.
Oh, 100%. And you meet so many different types of people where, if you were just relying upon, people in your network, you probably tend to meet a similar type of person. But when you're leasing apartments, you just don't know who's going to show up, and you don't know what opportunity that could lead to, right? That's really the key there is for the people who are showing up, leasing apartments and like trying to build a relationship. Like I have people who I've helped them now buy a condo. I've helped their friends buy a condo. Their dad wants to buy a multi-unit. So I rented an apartment, made $750, but now I've made $20,000 plus because I rented that person an apartment. So I think you have to, really see the big picture here.
Yeah, I think that property managers and landlords, they don't, if you're going to create vertical streams of income, like especially on the broker side, everyone that right now, anyone that's got a portfolio, there's a good chance that 50% of them will buy a house or another building themselves in the next couple of years, and there's revenue there. They're going to move out no matter what, and if you could capitalize and make some money off it, that's a huge way to add on top of your rental income.
Yeah. So next step in the journey here, you say, hey, I'm actually going to get my license. And then you jump right into, hey, I want to be in the commercial space. Like, talk to us a little about this trajectory.
Sure. So I think, it was a gradual trajectory, right? But after a certain point, you rip all these leases, you realize there's only so much time in the day. And so as, now I'm 30 years old. So when I was, 27, 28, I was like, okay, what's the next step, right? I see, working closely with a lot of these landlords, understanding, where are you investing? Why are you investing? How much money are you putting into each unit? Giving people suggestion on floor plans, etc. And then I just kind of, started those conversations, and then just, backed my way into opportunities like, hey, like, did you see this 4-unit in Humboldt? Like, I think, based on our conversation last week, I think that this could be a good project for you. And then, fake it till you make it, kind of just go show the property. My first contract I ever wrote, I had, I was just like trying to understand, like, did I miss anything? Like, so you just kind of have to go for it. But I think if you're relationship focused, and then you can provide information, you can provide value beyond just, hey, look at this listing. Like, I would go to see a place myself before I would show anyone it. I'd run through what changes I'd make to it, and then I'd come up with, approximate budget, and then approximate, rent, so that when I'm sending someone this opportunity, I'm not just sending them a link and say, I think this is good. I'm saying, I think you could do this with it. It would cost this much, and I think it would rent for this much. When do you want to go see it? So I think you have to, provide more value than just like, what do you think of this property?
That's so good, right? Like, I feel people are lazy both ways, the broker and the investor. Broker just throws something over the fence and says like, all right, let me know if you like any of these. And then the investor just sends it back and says, what do you think? Right? And like, we're just back to where we started. Like, this guy didn't provide any like insights or like, hey, this might work because X, Y, Z, or here's a potential, how you can pivot this asset. And the investor takes no time to dig in and ask a specific question. Just this volleyball back and forth where nothing gets done. And it's just, you see it all the freaking time.
Yeah, and I think some of my clients now, like when they're out of town, if I find an opportunity, like they trust me that, like, obviously I'll take a video and stuff while I'm there, but they trust me that if I'm laying out the plan, like this is the plan. Like I'm not like just like leaving it up to imagination. And so I've put a ton of properties under contract without my clients even seeing it. After I've built up a rapport and a track record that, I can take a look at a roof or tuck pointing and say, yeah, this, need a new roof, need to do this much work in tuck pointing. So there are those certain things that I didn't realize I knew that much about, but just over the years and like, following in the footsteps of Mike Zucker, the owner of Peak Properties, and just kind of like seeing how he looked at things. I just try to soak it up like a sponge.
So that's really good stuff there. So let's talk about that a little bit. So you mentioned to me, I can't remember if this was a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago, but one thing that stuck out is I think you said you walked like over 100 buildings before you actually made your first purchase as an investor. So you followed, one of the most successful people, Mike Zucker, here in Chicago, for, not for 30 minutes, not for a couple trips, like for a long time, right? And then bought that first building. Talk to us a little bit about that process.
Sure. So I would say, I think, about leasing, right? It typically ends in September, October, right? So a lot of leasing agents, they'll disappear come November, and you won't see them back till January or February. Just because there's not a lot of activity, right? So like that 1 year, I basically, starting in the fall, any spare time I had, if there was a property that popped up in Westtown, Logan, Wicker, I would go see it. Like it didn't have to like look like a screaming deal or anything. I just set up a showing as if I was representing myself, and would just go see it, go take a look at it, analyze it, understand it. And then I would also meet brokers that way, right? I would if it was a deal that, maybe is not a good fit for me, or maybe I couldn't afford it, I'd be like, hey, thanks for showing me the property. I think it's great. I don't think it's a good fit for me, but if you have something coming up, this is what I'm looking for. So this is how I met one of my first real big investor clients. Was he had a property that he was listing himself on Ohio in a Ukrainian village. And I said, hey man, like this isn't a good fit for me, but like, why are you selling this? And he explained, I bought it with 2 buddies from college. It's just time for us to get rid of it. But I run a syndicate, and this is my full-time job. I'm looking for deals myself. I just, kept in touch with him, trying to learn what he was doing. I actually invested in a deal that he had on Milwaukee, a 4-unit mixed-use building, and that was kind of like my first step into putting skin in the game, but without being the sole person running it. So that kind of got the wheels spinning. I was seeing what he was doing, and then I was just finding buildings for him to buy. And then that's how everything kind of started cooking from there. It was really just like literally just going and seeing buildings that anything that popped up, I would go see it.
That's fantastic, right? Like, so many people are sitting around, like, the point of this, and it's similar to what we had Workman on for a Tuesday tip, couple episodes ago, like, take action, default towards action. Even if you're wrong, even if it might be a waste of time, it's better than defaulting to inaction, right? Like, there's so much to be learned. I think one of the biggest things is, even when you make mistakes, and this happens when we flip houses all the time, like, you learn from that. You're now better. Like, the wealth of knowledge in your brain is an actual asset. Whereas, there is value in every one of those little mistakes that you have made along the way.
100%, or seeing other people's mistakes. You know what I mean? Going to these buildings and just being like, wouldn't have remodeled the bathroom like that. Wouldn't have laid it out like that. Wow, these windows are really crappy. Like just looking at, and then I would also I would see these buildings, right? And then I would see where they actually sold at. And I'd be like, oh, so I was right. It really wasn't worth $1 million. It closed at 850. So I think it's just like being in the market, right? Not just like, observing it, but like literally being in it, seeing it, tracking it, understanding who the players are too, right? I'd meet certain brokers and I'd be like, oh, okay, like this is a one-off guy. He has like not a lot going on here. Then I'd meet some people. I'm like, oh, Luke Blahnik, Anthony Flora, right? I'm like, oh, wow, these guys have a lot of stuff in Logan Square. Like, who are they, right? And then I would just, get interested, build relationships. And I think that's really the key.
Thinking back early on the brokerage side of things, what were some of the maybe mistakes you made or things that you were slower to learn that you might recommend other people to know sooner, I guess?
I mean, as a broker, I think you never want to be like too pushy. I think a lot of people try to especially when they're getting started, they get really excited about a deal, right? Your first time a client's writing a contract for $1 million. You're like calling your like distant relatives to let them know, like, hey, you got one here, right? You get so excited. And I think it's an emotional, there's an emotional element to it. I think you really need to try to hone that down, because then you disappear from the deal. You glance over certain elements to it, and then you end up looking like you don't care to your client because you checked out the day the contract was signed. Now I try to I'm not excited until my attorney sends me the closing statement and the keys are handed over. It literally
closing statement's not it, man. There's still
yes,
until it's signed.
Funded, signed, until that happens, I try to keep it out of my brain, which is tough, right? Because as a broker, you're trying to understand when you go from leasing, right, you have a lot of consistent kind of income. When you go to brokerage, you're projecting, you're okay, I think in 2 months I'm gonna make this. Oh wait, deal just died. It's very difficult to mentally feel stability.
Yeah, it is. Whether you're a real estate investor or you're just doing a flip, or if or you're a broker, there's so many ups and downs in any given period. It might be in the day. I might get 2 bad things of information in the morning, and you can't ride the highs or the lows too low and the highs too high, and you have to kind of keep the steadiness about you. Sometimes almost to the detriment of you don't celebrate the wins enough or frequently enough or loud enough. But I think the level, keeping the level minded, even when your lows or highs, I think that's important.
And your clients depend on you to be level headed, right? They're the ones getting all excited and emotionally attached. It's sometimes your job. You never want to, you're not out there to kill a deal, but you're also out there to be the voice of reason.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's why
you are there. You have a fiduciary responsibility. They're paying for your expertise, and if you're just out there being all hyped up and not being level headed, that's a huge disservice.
I think one of the main reasons or purposes of real estate brokers that we have still these days is to keep the emotion out. We're supposed to curb that emotion that the buyers and the sellers might have.
Yeah, for good or bad.
Yep, exactly.
100%. And also nowadays I see myself as real estate consultant. I think that's my main the way I look at it, because especially in the multifamily department, right? When someone's buying a condo, it's, obviously there's an inspection, there can be some dynamic components to it, but it's not as crazy. I have a client under contract on a building in Wrigleyville right now, and they're young investors. They're really smart kids, and they really want it, right? We bid on this building. I told them, like, hey, I don't think this is a good building for you to buy because X, Y, and Z. They're like, well, we want to write an offer. We're really interested. I'm like, okay. We go under contract. We do the inspection. There's signs of termites. There's the whole building needs to be resided. It really looks like a teardown, if you ask me. Some brokers would just say, hey, let's just ask for a credit and get this wrapped up, right? Because they're so eager to buy. They really want in the game, right? And for me, I'm just like, don't buy this building. Like, you do not have to buy this building. Don't buy it. We're going to find something better. Like, I'm thinking long term. You guys want to be investors. This building is going to give you an experience in which you're never going to want to buy a building again. So I think that that's like the key component, is like making sure that your broker is someone who is like actually looking out for your best interest, not just looking to like make a quick buck.
A good broker should not want that to happen too, because they would not want their name affiliated with a crappy deal going forward. I always tell people, like, listen, I'm not going to let you buy it only because I don't want your failure of this I don't want my name to be associated with it. So
100%. I mean, termites is not like that's not something I'm like rolling the dice on. Like, so.
All right. Alex, let's talk about your first investment. So your property on Damon. You're one of the few brave ones. I know you've been in the game, but your first actual investment, you decided to do a full gut. COVID slaps you in the mouth, a couple months after your purchase. Talk to us about this. First off, talk to us about the concept of, I'm going to gut my first property. And I'll go ahead, and before you answer, I'm going to say, hey, this isn't for everyone. Like, don't go out there and just gut your first property unless you have liquidity in the stones to do it.
Yeah, no, I definitely would not recommend doing what I did. But so how it started, right? How I found the deal was through brokers that I networked with while I was doing this tour of 100 buildings, right? I met this broker. It was an off-market deal. The seller was working with this, this guy. He was shopping it around, and basically, the building was, in really poor condition. So they didn't want to put their rationale was, I don't want to put it on the market because it's in such bad condition, right? So someone had dropped a contract on it, and they called me up. I walked through it. They said, you have 24 hours to let us know if you want to buy it or not. I didn't do an inspection. Also do not recommend that. When you're in a building, sometimes, at least for me, like it was just so flat and level in there. There was no squeaks. I looked at the talk pointing. I looked at the facade. And if you're going to gut the whole thing, it's like, I'm not testing the water pressure, right? Just looking at the general structure of it. So, bought it 2019. I used the lender that the client I had met was using. So I had some sort of rapport and track record there. Started the construction 2020, literally as COVID's hitting. Luckily, like, purchased most of like lumber and materials before everything went crazy. But took a little bit longer than, you would expect. And, the whole thought process was, I want to create a product that is something that I wish I could rent, right? Something that I would be excited to go lease out, and it checked every box that I felt like other people, weren't hitting, right? 2-bed, 2-bath, primary suite, walk-in closet. And I wanted to do quality finishes where, I understand when you're an investor and you're just looking on like a 5-year timeline, right? It's much different. It probably doesn't make sense to spend $10 a square foot on flooring, right? If you're only going to own it for 5 years, but if you're going to own it for 25 years, then, I really wanted to invest in quality materials that I wouldn't have to, remodel in in 10 years. I wanted to do it the right way, set it and forget it. So yeah, it was a trial by fire. It definitely, went over budget, took longer than he thought. The classic.
Still alive though. Still here.
Still alive, still here. And full disclosure, the only reason I was able to do this was because my partners are my parents, who are both also into real estate. And so it was a group effort. And at the time, people were like, why are you spending $700 for a 3-flat on Damon and that needs everything? Like, people thought that I was kind of crazy. Now I look back and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't, just jump in.
Well, I'm looking at the pictures, and the place looks beautiful. I mean, you did a wonderful job on the repairs and putting the place back together. But going into it, what made you think like that was like the right next move? Like, where'd you get the confidence from, or what was it? Was it just having your parents as partnership? Like, tell us a little more about the mindset going into something like that, because we're talking here how it might seem crazy, but what was it that helped you overcome public opinion, maybe your own fears? Tell us a little more about that.
I just obviously could see where the neighborhood was going, just on Damon, just south of Division, right? Obviously, just a lot of growth. And funny enough, my neighbor who bought 1121 Damon a month before me, his was a 3-unit with a side lot. He bought his for 1.4 and was doing a construction project. It ends up that it's a CEO of a huge company. He put $2 million maybe into his building, and it's a crazy single family home. So just like, there's that timing component where you see what's going on in the neighborhood, and it's like, maybe I'm over improving, right? But when I'm complete, and all done, all rented out, it's still checked out, right? And what I was in for was far less than what it was worth, but it wasn't like a spread that would make, investors, want to just jump in, right? There's a, obviously I was going to live there as well. So that creates a different aspect to it. But I think that, over time, my model for what I'm planning on doing, it works. But it's just, maybe it's not for everyone.
How much was your budget on this, your construction budget?
My budget for that building was like $400.
Okay. How did you go into this thinking like, you could take that? Again, I'm amazed by just like, you're making it sound way too easy. And I'm sure people listening, like, how did you overcome? Like, is it just like, not many people walk in and do a $400,000 gut rehab project on the first hand? Like, what gave you that confidence? I'm trying to get inspire the people listening of like what your train of thought on how you're able to you just sound so confident. Like, how'd you get there?
Like I said, it was just watching other people do it and understanding some of the pitfalls. Like for certain things would be like, when I show a new apartment, you're right, and then you'd show it, and the neighbors above you would like be like running back and forth, and you could hear that so clearly. Like, for me, like, that's just like a non-starter. Like, I wanted to make sure that I was using the right insulation, putting down, rubber underneath my floors, like all these certain things I picked up on over the years. I'm like, I don't want my bathroom to look like that. Like, I'm not going to use tile that's $2 a square foot. Like, I want to use tiles that look like this. So I definitely spend more money than, the average person would do. But I think that now, right, that's been 3 or 4 years, I think my rent have gone up like 18%. So it's a product that has legs on it, where a lot of the times we work for landlords that would do like Home Depot style remodels, right? You get $2,200 first lease. It comes up for renewal. They don't renew because it's not as nice as like what it looked like. And then you're renting it for $19.95. A year goes by, you're renting it for $19.50. Another year goes by, you're renting it for $18.50. So it's like in year 5, it's like your rent's like $200 lower than your first lease. So for me, that just doesn't make sense, because I want something that's going to like improve over time, not like just kind of like get worse.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. And I mean, there's also the intangible of just you attract a better tenant, you have less headaches. There's so much to this. Like I get asked the question a lot. It's a similar mindset, and oh, you spent so much, I could have done this for this amount. It's like, that's great. You would have had a different product, right? Like there's a reason we spend it what we do. And I think one of the things that as investors, we get so short-sighted, like we, the Burr method. We want to pull our money out, right? Everyone wants to. It's great. It's great when it works. But what happens is like we default to the lowest possible rehab to make that work, right? Like we back into the number as opposed to like, wait, if I'm going to own this thing for 20 years, this is the right move. Like, let's go ahead and do it, right? Like we become slaves to the spreadsheet, and it creates a subpar product or problems down the road, right? Yeah, cool. Year number one might look better, but this is something you're doing for whatever, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. If you're not flipping this thing, like that's the mindset you got to think with. And I don't know, the last 3 minutes have hit home here for me.
Yeah. And the 12 or 13 grand or the couple percent additionally tried getting on your refi on your Burr, you end up putting it back into the building in other ways, either things you didn't do right or things you got to go back and do again, to like what Alex was saying, having to do these, change tile out 5 years from now. Like, so you're either spending it now and doing it right with a lot less headache, or you end up ultimately spending it over time anyways.
Well, and we're going ahead and make the assumption that you don't even get a bigger appraisal, a higher appraisal, which you do.
Yes.
Right. Like we're just making the assumption that appraisal is going to hit it, and that's not the case. Like usually you can, you say like, hey, that comp's got this tile, I have this tile. Like usually you can fight a little bit here and there, and even on the front end be like, this, I know you're going to look at XYZ down the street. This is why my product is superior. If you can come in and talk to an appraiser like that and know that, hey, I already know the 4 comps you're going to come to the table with. Let me talk to you. Like, you're going to get the number you need, or you're the number you deserve, I should say.
Yeah. I think there's two paths in real estate, like investing. You're either really good at not spending money, or you're really good at spending money. And for me, my path is like, I'm going to be really good at spending money. So like, all my, coworkers and colleagues, whatever, can tell me I'm crazy. Like, come talk to me in year 5 when, my stuff like has no maintenance issues. My tenants love it. And it's just hands off for me. Maybe at scale, I would do it like slightly different, but for me, it's more personal. These are properties in which like I, 1, have lived in, and 2, like just plan on owning and enjoying for a long time.
I love what you said there, because you got the people on the two ends, the people that are really good at not spending the money, and they're not even necessarily the ones that get in trouble, or you get the people that are spending a lot of money. It's the people in the middle that spend too much money on the wrong things and not enough on the right things. So it's that messy middle almost. Like there's actually guys out there that are really good at being not running, I don't know the best way to, I'm not gonna say slumlord or anything, but it's just like a lower end product consistently, and they know how to band-aid stuff effectively. They have a team that has all the same mindset. And then you have people that spend the brave money. It's the people in the middle that mess up, and they just do it all out of order, and they're the ones that ultimately end up getting eaten up by the market.
Yeah. So let's pivot here. Let's talk about house hacking, because you've helped a lot of house hackers along the way. You and I have had several conversations about just the overall philosophy. We've had some good laughs about, everyone who comes in and says, oh, I'm looking to buy something in Ukrainian Village, and I want a 12% cash on cash year 1, and I want it with an FHA, blah, blah, blah. Like, talk to us about just a little bit of reality and like your philosophy around like what you tell your clients who are house hackers.
For sure. So I think there's like 2 camps of people, right? And now I've gotten better at like setting expectations for this, because a lot of people, when they want a house hack, like maybe they hear about it through a friend or a podcast like this, or Bigger Pockets or something, and it's alluring, this idea of tenants paying your mortgage. You can live for free, right? I don't think you can live, like, at least in the neighborhoods that I'm talking about, like, you can't live in a 3-unit building and not pay any rent, especially with where rates are at right now. So let's just throw that out the window. Like, you have to pay something to live there. And then what quality do you want it to be? Is really where people go one way or the other. Some people say, "Oh no, yeah, I'm ready to do work." It's like, okay, cool. Let's talk about that. What does that look like? And then they're like, "Well, I have like $7,000 for construction," and I'm like, "Okay, well, that could maybe get us like a powder bathroom." Like,
Yeah,
that's not going to
with
go.
the light fixtures covered. Next.
Yeah, that's not going to go so far. So, that's usually where it goes. And then we start looking at condos. And then what I do is I flip it where I'm like, let's start with a condo that maybe can use some renovation. Treat this as an investment property. Let's find one that's maybe, mismarketed, has rug in the bedrooms, or has something where we can still improve it. You guys can start building your equity into that. And then when you're ready to go buy a 2 or a 3 unit, you can rent that one out, keep it. Let's find a building with no rental restrictions, and you treat that as an investment property, because for right now, for what you can afford, it might not make sense to go buy a 2 or 3 unit. The people who can buy a 2 or 3 unit and want to do some work they usually come from like a real estate family, or their parents own property. So they understand, like, okay, if I'm going to spend, $850 in Ukrainian Village for a 2 or 3 unit, it's not going to look like a condo, right? It's going to have old pine floors. It's going to have something that's, has some character to it, but neat, it doesn't look like a condo. And for those people, they're a little bit more long-term minded, and they understand the big picture. But for the people who want something that looks, like a condo, but don't have the budget or expertise, it's really difficult.
Yeah. No, great stuff there. And it's a great reminder to everyone listening, because you go on like a Bigger Pockets forum, or whatever. And it's always like the thought process is like, oh, I'm going to house hack. I'm going to do this. And, I'm going to have 50 units in the next 5 years. And it's like, no, like here's reality slapping you in the face. Like, these are the parameters that you need to play within.
Yeah, no, it's very alluring. And I think that just when the rubber meets the road, a lot of people are just not really able to do it. Which I think is like, it's better to admit that, hey, right now I might not be ready for this. Let's talk about what do you need to get ready for this? You know what I mean? I think a lot of people, like, they just want to position themselves like, oh, I'm a real estate investor now. It's like, well, let's, slow and steady. I don't think it makes sense to jump into something that, when you buy a 2 or 3 flat, right? These buildings are 120 years old. If you don't have cash on hand and you find out that your sewer collapsed, or your electric service needs to be upgraded, water service needs to be upgraded, roof needs to go, tuck pointing, like, we're talking about like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 surprises. So that, that can really set people back if they're not prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you mentioned a few neighborhoods. Let's talk about Westtown, right? You kind of play in these A areas. You seem to focus mostly around, call it the Westtown area. Can you, for someone, let's say you're talking to someone from California, never heard of it, their buddy says, hey, you should invest in Westtown. Can you give us the 2-minute rundown? What are, description of the neighborhood for an investor who's never heard of it before?
That's tough. I haven't really thought about that.
You know this one. Go.
Yeah, at least you know the show's not scripted. Yeah. There you go, listeners.
So it's like, Westtown is where, at least, my personal perspective, is where I feel like a lot of, young people are traveling to. let's just talk like more specifically like Wicker and Logan, right? Because everything else kind of like feeds off that. There's a lot of restaurants, there's a lot of bars, there's a lot of nightlife. You have a lot of different parks. It's just like where the cool kids are hanging out. Where as compared to like Lincoln Park, it's just a little bit more buttoned up. Not as many cool edgy bars or restaurants. So I feel like Westtown has a kind of more of a creative spirit to it. And that's why people are, choosing to live over here is it's a neighborhood feel, for a little bit of a better price point than you would get in Lakeview or Lincoln Park. And just being west of the highway, it just has a different feel. It's just kind of hard to explain. You don't feel, I know Wicker Park when, back in the early 1900s, they were kind of pitching Wicker Park as like Chicago's premier suburb. And I think that there's something cool about that. Like I can you kind of feel that, right? You're west of the highway. It just kind of has a different feel, a little bit more edgy here and there, a little bit more artistic, and a little bit more diverse, in many ways.
You can see that in the housing stock, how the houses were built back in the 1900s. A lot of those are still here today. It's historic. Inglewood is that same thing too. As crazy as that sounds, their houses, especially on the east side of Inglewood, are awesome. Talk to us about the casino. The casino's coming over there. I think it's a little delayed now. Like, what's the speculation look like around that, or what does the community feel about that?
It's funny because I feel like two years ago it was like more about a headline thing. I don't really hear so many investors talking about it just because I don't think it makes it's more of a tourist attraction. It's not going to be like a resident attraction, in my perspective. So I think it, overall it's good just for the city. Just we need more, we need more jobs here. We need more people visiting Chicago. But from an investment standpoint, I don't think people are like targeting, purchasing buildings to be, in proximity. Could be wrong.
Have you looked at straying out of this? Because you play in Humboldt, Logan, Wicker, down even south of there in the Ukrainian. Like, have you considered other areas, or do you feel like, hey, there's enough inventory here, even at the higher price points, where I can have a nice portfolio?
Sure. I think for me, it's just about figuring out like, all right, what's my competitive advantage, and then like the why, right? So for me, like if I was looking at investing in apartment buildings strictly to make the most money possible, I honestly probably wouldn't. Yeah, I would not be looking in the neighborhoods I'm looking. It's not a pure, money grab. Let's produce the most cash possible kind of play. For me, I'm investing in these neighborhoods because, like, one, I live here, and like two, I enjoy them, and then also, I think that there's something about like preservation, right? These old buildings, like they're 120 years old. Like they need reinvestment, and so I feel like I think new construction is interesting too, but for me, I feel like there's a sustainable component to this by rebuilding, redesigning, and breathing like new life into these existing structures.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like and we had an episode earlier talking about the historic preservation in Wicker Park, and it's a pain in the ass. It's like, well, I'm glad they're not tearing down these buildings and building your 4-unit condos with the new brick. Like, what I'm saying? Like these things should be, maybe it's a little too tight, but like these things should be around. These things should not be torn down.
100%. And so, like, I'll tell you this, like both my Damon building and then we can get into my Evergreen building, both are landmarked, orange rated properties, right? So they have, significant historical significance and cannot be torn down. For me, what's nice about that is that I know that my block is always going to look the way it does. And if you look at East Village, right, which is south of Division, east of Damon, you go east of Winchester and you drive down those streets, it's not to call anyone out, but it's ruined in many respects. It's condo building after condo building after condo building that architecturally have no character. There's no guidelines at all. It's just like black brick, or the ones from the early 2000s that are like split face block on the side, red, that like kind of like me and my coworkers call it Playmobil brick. It looks like a fake brick house. Like those buildings they don't do anything for me, So I understand there's expenses related to creating a facade that maybe has more dimension or stone accents and whatnot. I get that, but I also think that there needs to be, I think that those streets are not ones that you're gonna walk your kids down and be like, wow, look at all these beautiful black brick buildings with the same design. It just doesn't do anything for me.
I love that answer, and I agree wholeheartedly. All right, so can you talk to us a little about just finding deals and finding opportunities? One of the things that I've learned from you over the last year is just how much you focus on TDO ordinance, being zoned R5, doing administrative adjustments. Like, you worked with your investors to get pretty creative here. So maybe if you can give us like a recent example or a past example, but we talk about how hard it is to find inventory, get things done. And there's all these little things that we can leverage if we're in the game and we're understanding these things and seeing them every single day.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say number one, which is not something anyone's going to be able to replicate, but what can use this is network. I have a network of people, right? Where, I know you, Tom, right? Where if I find a deal and I think that it's going to be a good fit for you guys, I'm going to call you, right? You're going to be on top of the list, right? That's because we built a relationship. I understand that you're a real buyer. I understand what you're looking for, etc. So network is number one. Sometimes I get hit with the lucky stick and someone just calls me and there's a deal. Like, that's how it happens. But in terms of ways to be creative, obviously the new ADU play is huge. Every investor who's getting into the game should have that printed out, and target those zones ideally. I mean, if you're looking to do a big renovation project, why not find a place where you could turn a 4 to a 5, a 6 into a 7 with the duplex down? Like those seem to be, it's obvious to me. And then, most recently, 618 Wrightwood is the building I sold in December. And the play here is there's, basically a new ordinance in which, RM5 buildings, you don't really see them in West Town so much. It's mostly Lincoln Park, Old Town, parts of Uptown, right? They'll have this. And the trick with RM5 is if you wanted to add units, you used to have to add 1-to-1 parking per unit. If you're on a standard 25-foot wide lot, you're limited to 3 parking spaces, really. So there's this property, it popped up on Top Agent Network, listed as a single family home, which it was, and it was landlocked in the back, so no parking. I literally fell out of my chair when I saw it because I knew exactly what you could do with it. I went and saw it, run down building, and went and saw it. My client was running a marathon in Hawaii, and he had done this on another property, and that's why I kind of went to him first. I didn't need to coach him through how to do this, so we put it under contract. And because it was in half a mile from a train or bus, you can go through a process called administrative adjustment. Shout out to Liz Butler from Taft. She's an amazing zoning attorney. And basically you submit a letter to the alderman. Both of the neighboring properties have to just not, make an issue about it. And we were able to change.
Yeah, they don't have to sign off on it. They just have to they just have to not make a stink after they get the letter.
Exactly. And
they have 10 days.
Yeah, exactly. So we turned a single family into a 7-unit property, because now, you don't need 2 egresses if the units are under 750 square feet. I think they've actually changed that now. So basically, we took a single family home building, we chopped it in half, did 6 1-bedrooms, and then a top floor 2-bed, 2-bath. So bought the building for $900, probably put $800-900 into it, and it's going to be worth almost $3 million. So definitely one of the the better deals that I've been a part of, and it's because I was able to understand what you could do with it, not just what it was.
I love it. I love those big repositionings that no one else sees. Like those deserve those big payouts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the listing broker, she's a very nice person, but she was a residential broker, so she wasn't really privy to what was happening. Like,
yeah, I mean, didn't intentionally, but did the guy a disservice, right, by not saying like, hey, by the way, this is blah 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 blah. That would have attracted a lot more people.
Yeah, if I was the listing broker, I would have been like, here's an opportunity to turn a building into 7 apartments, and then I would have charged, I don't know, 200,000 a unit, maybe a little bit less. So, yeah, I think you just have to, that's why there's a difference between, commercial or residential agents, right? I do residential real estate as well, but I just think that there are certain things that you just won't be able to get from your normal residential agent, because they're not looking at things in the same light.
All right, Alex. Awesome. Before we wrap here, what does the next 5 years look like to you? Any predictions, any crystal ball sites you see out there?
Ooh, next 5 years. I think that, as the coastal cities, post-COVID, become more and more expensive, I think that Chicago is like finally going to hit, become on the radar for a lot of people that, otherwise would live in LA or New York. Like, I do think that Chicago is like gonna, because of its affordability, its cultural offering, being on the lake. I think Chicago is actually, I understand the political aspect of it, but I think that we're going to have a really big next 5 years.
Awesome.
Well, I like it. Let's end with some optimism.
Yeah, I like it. I love it. All right, Tom, you ready to wrap?
Let's do it.
All right, Alex, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. What is your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do this?
My competitive advantage is just my network of people and being just nose to the ground, just being out there. That's my competitive advantage.
Awesome. Good stuff. All right. You've offered a lot of advice already, but what is one specific piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
Find a neighborhood that you would live in and invest in that one.
Love it.
All right, Alex, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I go to, music events, underground parties. Yeah, that's about it.
All right. Mark, that's your neck of the woods, man. You guys should talk after this. All right. Give us a good book, podcast, or self-development activity you recommend to our listeners.
Going for a long walk every day.
Yeah. Headphones in or no?
No headphones, no phone.
There it is. I like it.
Now, do not bring the phone. That's it's tough for me, but that's key.
The only time it's ever came back to bit me was when Mark, we were recording the one episode and I messed up the times and it came back and I had like 47 missed calls from Mark. I think it was at like 2:30. It was at 2, and like strolled in at 2:15 to like, are you dead?
We were interviewing Sterling Bay that day too. It's like, man,
Yeah, it wasn't like we weren't interviewing a friend. We were interviewing like someone we'd waited 6 months to get out after 20 cold calls, and I showed up 15 minutes late.
all right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
Rich on Samo from App Properties. He's been my mentor for the past 5 years, amongst other people, but he he's the long-term landlord, understands multifamily property. His family's been in Chicago for over 130 years, and he knows more about the city than I'll ever know.
Love it. We'll post him in the show notes. All right. Alex, thank you so much. You provided a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah, 100%. Thanks so much for having me on. People can contact me on Instagram. My handle is actually Good Real Estate. You'll look us up, Peak Realty. You can find my phone number and email on our website. Reach out if you have, a general basic question, you want to buy real estate, whatever it is. I'm always open to, chatting with people.
All right. Mark, Chicago Fact, who are we playing for? Who's our sponsor?
All right. Our sponsor today is Perry Farella from First Community Mortgage, loan originator. So and we're playing for Patricia Patrick. So Pat, I saw that.
That is fake.
Patricia Patrick, definitely from the Northwest side. So, all right. So
if you get this right, Patricia, if this is a real person, we'll win a $50 gift card from Perry's bank account here. So
yeah, definitely.
we talked a little about Westtown. This famous author resided at 1667 Humboldt, which I would have said that's Humboldt Park. I didn't realize Westtown, goes that far north. He's famously known for writing the Oz book series, including The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Mark, who is that author? And I'll give you multiple choice.
Okay.
Is it Walt Whitman, L. Frank Baum, Edwin Ballmer, James Farrell?
Edwin Ballmer.
Alex, what are you going with? Give us a guess here.
I'm going with A.
Walt Whitman. You guys split it. It was L. Frank Baum. Sorry, it wasn't too Chicago-y, but he did live in 1667 Humboldt.
Oh, man. I totally guessed on that one. I don't know, Alex, if you guessed, but I had no clue.
Yeah.
All right, Patricia Patrick.
English major on here.
Yeah. Patricia Patrick, we will put your name back in and get it drawn again, and we'll play for the Chicago Facts. So
that's what happens when you throw me a fake name. You get your question wrong.
Yeah. Some people do put fake names when they order stuff online, and I put them back a couple times because I had a bend over one day. I'm like, we're not gonna play for bend over. Like, I almost looked up their address to see who really was at that address to call them out on the show, but I didn't. But Patricia, put your name back in. Perry, thank you for your sponsor. Tom, thank you as always. Alex, thanks for coming on here. Listeners, if you know someone that make a good episode, if you know someone that could add value to you as a listener, to our other listeners, we'd love to hear, even if you've only done a couple deals and you got some good feedback or some value you could add to us. If you've done 100 deals and you got some way you could mentor us all, we'd love to have you on here and share your wisdom with our listeners. So Tom, thank you. Alex, thank you. Listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much.